This week in this presentation, I'm going to talk about value engineering. So this is a systematic methodology that we may use to solve a design problem, whether it is designing a product or a service. It started in 1947 when the vice president of purchases at the General Electric Company or GE company realized that during the wartime, most probably it's the World War II, materials are often substituted, because this material is rare and it is during the wartime, so people need to find something else that can be used for the same function. And then he realized or he noticed that those kind of substitution not only satisfied the requirements, but sometimes it's even satisfied the requirements at a lower cost than the original material that was planned for making the product. So he asked another person, Lawrence Miles, to study the possibility. Is it possible to do such kind of thing, looking at the other alternatives to do the same kind of functions or requirements, but with a lower cost? The result of his study, Mr. Miles' study, is called value analysis. It is a systematic approach to problem solving based on functional performance. So here really the emphasis on value engineering is in functional performance. Really about the function is the emphasis of this methodology. Now this is what value engineering is formally defined by the Society of American Value Engineers. It is a systematic application of recognized techniques which identify the functions. So functions is the first keyword here of a product or a service. So we need to first identify the functions of either a product or a service. And then once we've done that, we will establish a monetary value for that function. So we are going to assess how valuable a function is for the product. And it is expressed in a monetary value. So we can really see the value of a function of a product for customers, for example. And then after we know what the functions are in the product, what the values are of those functions, we try to think about the alternatives to provide the same functions at the lowest cost. So not only at the lower cost, but at the lowest cost. But here, when you see the lowest cost, it doesn't mean that value engineering wants us to make the quality of the product lower. No, it's not. It still wants us to keep a good quality and makes the product still reliable to do all the functions at the lowest cost. Okay, so it doesn't mean that we try to make the cost as low as possible by sacrificing the functions of the product. Based on the definition on the previous slide, we can also say that these are the questions that needs to be answered in value engineering. First is, what does a product do? Or what does a service provide? And then second, what is the lowest cost to provide such function? And finally, we are thinking what kind of alternatives, what else will do the job, will perform the same functions. And those are related to the first three stages in value engineering. They're called information, creative, and evaluation. And then there will be three more stages in value engineering, and they're called planning, reporting, and implementation. We're going to look at all the stages one by one, and then the first stage, information stage, is the biggest and the most important stage in value engineering. The information stage is further divided into three parts. The first is the part where we develop the information. The second is the part that we determine the function, and the output is a function list. And finally is we're performing a function analysis and evaluation, which the outputs are the cost function worksheet and diagram, which is called FAST diagram. Now let's see the first part of the information stage, which is the information development part. So the project starts by developing or collecting all available information concerning the project. For example, here it is listed 6 things that the team might want to collect at the very beginning of the project. And then the team also needs to collect the data about all the present costs that is involved in the production, both direct costs and indirect costs. The team also needs to set the target for the improvement. What does the team want to improve? For example, like improving productivity, improving the quality, or reducing the product cost. Also, it would be better if all those targets can be measured quantitatively. For example, the target is reducing the product cost by 15% or reducing the product cost by $2 per unit, for example. And then finally, the team also needs to set the time of this project. And based on all those things, now the project has quite clear scope about what does it want to do. It means what is the target of this project, and then what is the time to finish this project. Based on the cost data that has been collected in the previous slide, the first thing to do is to make all the costs visible in a very detailed fashion. No ambiguity. So the purpose of doing this is to identify the areas of high cost. Remember that high cost doesn't mean that it is something bad. We do want to achieve the lowest cost, but it doesn't mean that we will try to reduce anything with high cost. No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that these high costs may become the starting points to identify unnecessary cost. So the key word here is unnecessary. It's not about whether the cost is high or low, it's about whether the cost is necessary or not to perform the function of the product. Okay, so it is really the same with the definition at the beginning. We try to achieve the lowest cost, but it doesn't mean that we just want something with the lowest cost. We want to achieve that lowest cost by reducing or eliminating all the unnecessary cost. So sometimes, some types of costs can be material cost, labor cost, and burden or overhead cost that cannot be traced directly to specific products. For example, the building rent, electricity, they're included in this overhead cost. Now let's take a look at an example from a value engineering study on the Youth Assistance Program. So this is a program that tries to help young people who have some trouble in the society. They try to help them such that they can go back to the society performing well and not causing any trouble. One of the main activities in this program is rehabilitation. And for each case of rehabilitation, it costs the program more than $109. So in the cost visibility table, we try to list all the activities, all these items that is involved in the rehabilitation activity. And then for each item, we list out what kind of cost and how much each item contributes to the total cost of the rehabilitation activity. You can see here that all of the cost elements fall into the labor category, because in this rehabilitation activity, I guess most of the time it's about you meet the person, the young people who has trouble, the young people who have trouble, try to talk with them and such things. So all of this cost is about labor. Once we've got all the information that we need for this project, we can move on to the second part. In the second part, we determine all the functions in the product or in the service. And then the output of this part is a function list. So what is a function? Well, you can say that it is a property that makes something, like a product, works, or makes the product sell. It attracts people to buy the product. You can also say it is the end result desired by customers. You can also say it is what customers paid for. So they pay for the product, so they get the function of the product. You can also say a function is a requirement, a goal, or an objective of a product or a service. So let's think about this activity. We are filing papers. Well, in the context of value engineering, it is not a function. It is an action. We are filing the paper, but the goal of this activity is not filing paper by itself, right? When you file the papers, when you keep all the papers in the folder, that's not the goal. That's not the objective of the activity, right? The goal is you want to store information. Can you see the difference? The action is, yes, you keep the paper in a folder, but that's not really the goal. The goal or the objective is that you want to store an information. And this is what value engineering wants you to define a function. So it shouldn't be about the action itself, it should be the objective of that action. Well, the benefit of doing this is now you can think about this function in a broader sense. You are not limited or restricted to just thinking about, okay, I have to use paper and then I have to put it inside a folder, right? If you're saying something about filing papers, then you kind of already restricting the options into paper and put it in a file, a folder, or such thing. But now when you move on to say that the function is actually storing information, now you see that you start thinking that, oh, to store information, it doesn't have to be on a paper. It doesn't have to be in a folder, right? You can, for example, store information on a hard drive. So this is one of the benefits of defining the function based on the objective, not the action. In value engineering, the function must be defined in two words. The first word is a verb, the second word is a noun. And then each function should be measurable. So for example, if there's a function of create design, it can be measured by time. How long does it take to create a design? Once we have defined the functions, we can categorize them into work functions and cell functions. Work functions are the functions that are quantitative, can be measured quantitatively, and they are related to the value of really using the product. For example, there's a function of remove kidney. It can be measured by the time to do the removal or the cost. Now look at the other type of functions, cell functions. For example, increase, beauty, improve style, increase prestige. You can see that these functions are qualitative. How can you measure how much beauty a product or a service increases? It's difficult, right? You cannot really do that. So it is qualitative, and these are related to value, not about really actually using the product, but it's more about the prestige value, like how much the user perceive he or she is getting something by using the product, but not about really the usage of the product. So what is the purpose of categorizing the functions into two types, work functions and self functions? Well, it may help us to look at the cost. So we can assess of the total current cost that we have, how much do we spend for work functions and how much do we spend for self functions. Depends on the product, we may want to adjust these proportions. Okay, so you can see that, oh, okay, of all the total costs that I spent for the product, apparently a lot of them, for example, falls into work functions. Is it correct for your type of product or is it not? If it's correct, then it's okay. If not, then you may want to adjust this proportion of the cost that you're currently spending. The functions may also be categorized into basic and secondary functions. Basic functions are the ones that fulfill the primary purpose of a product. The product exists because they have these basic functions. You cannot eliminate these basic functions because if you eliminate these basic functions, then the product doesn't exist, right? Because the product must have these functions to be called as such product. Now, all the other functions that are not basic functions are called secondary. They're just supporting functions. So in the example of a pencil, the lead part of a pencil performs the basic functions. Because the pencil has the primary function to write something, this lead part fulfills that functions. This lead part of the pencil enables us to write using the pencil on a paper. The eraser, however, it has a nice function to erase something. If you write down something that is a mistake, you want to erase it, then this eraser will do that function. But eraser is not the main function of a pencil. It is for erasing something, while the main function of a pencil is to write something. So this is an example of all the functions that can be described for a pencil. And then the description of the functions is divided into each part of the pencil. Now, what is the use of defining the function for each part of product? Well, in this approach, when we break the project into requirements or functions, it breaks the barrier about how we think about how we visualize a product. So we are not thinking of a pencil as a pencil that looks like this, typically, but we break down this pencil into its functions, such that when we're looking just the functions, not the entire product, we may think about new solutions. Because we're now thinking that each function may be done in a different way. They don't have to be performed in this kind of shape of product or that kind of method to do the same functions. So by breaking down a product into its functions, we can think about new solutions and not just about making the existing product work better. So we are not just about improving the current product, but we are thinking beyond that. We are thinking with the new creativity, thinking about new solutions to perform the same functions, but with new or with an alternative method. We are not having the barrier that these functions of, let's say, writing down something must be performed by a pencil with this kind of parts and this kind of shape. Furthermore, we can categorize the functions based on the categories that we've talked about before. So either the function is basic or is it a secondary function, whether the function falls into the work functions or cell functions. From the previous part, we have obtained a list of functions. We have also categorized whether it is basic or secondary, whether it is a working or cell function. Next, we are going to analyze those functions and evaluate them. We are going to produce a cost function worksheet and a fast diagram. I'm going to talk about this in the second part of the video. So see you in the second part. Thank you.